Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I'm your host, Randi-lee. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Denise Bossarte. Welcome, Denise. I'm super excited to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here and talk with you today.
Excellent. So just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, sure. During my day job, I work at a large school district as an IT professional. But outside of that, I'm an artist. So I'm a photographer, mixed media artist. I'm a writer. I'm a poet. So I do all kinds of things. And I'm married to my wonderful husband, and we have a fur baby, Saphira, that is
What kind of fur baby? What kind?
She's this beautiful pixie bob cat. So.
Oh my goodness, I love cats and dogs and pretty much any animal. Not snakes. I don't really like
furry
reptiles.
ones, right?
Yes, I like all the furry animals. Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's jump into our main topic here and talk about mental health. I always tell the guests, you start your story wherever it feels most comfortable for you.
Okay, sure. So I'm a survivor of childhood abuse, sexual abuse by my grandfather. And that started when I was very young. It's hard as a survivor with our trauma brains to really sometimes put the experience of the trauma of the abuse in a timeline with the rest of your life. So I can't line things up 100%, but I know because of how tall I was relative to the adults in my life, it was early elementary school.
Oh,
and that went on until he died when I was a freshman in high school.
And well, that's a while.
It was a while, yeah. And it's not something during that time, I ever shared with anyone because I was just so afraid of him. He was this 6'4" ex-military guy. And I think people would look at him as a narcissist. He'd be labeled as a narcissist these days, based on what I understand of that.
Yeah.
But I was just terrified of him. So one reason I didn't share. The other was that I was just so filled with shame. When you're a little kid like that, your brain does weird things to try to understand what's happening, what's going on. But usually what happens with children is that you convince yourself it's your fault, that you brought it on to yourself. And so for various reasons, I did not share. And when the abuse was happening, my defense mechanism was to dissociate. So that's how I got through the actual events. But after or in between those events, which happened pretty much every summer when we were left with my grandparents to have summer fun at the house on the lake with skiing and boating and fishing. And it was great, except for, the abuse happened too.
Yeah. So when you take that part out, it really does sound like it would be fun.
Yeah, it was kind of idyllic and there were woods around and yeah, so it was an idyllic situation there. I mean, my family looked pretty normal from the outside overall.
Most do.
Yeah, most do. And so it would happen in the summer. And then, of course, over the holidays, we would see my grandparents. And I just tried to not be near him at all if I could avoid it. But, at the summer, you're isolated there. He had pretty much control over the environment. So to kind of, I guess, keep my sanity, my little child brain would just kind of repress it, forget about it, try not to think about those things. I had this reoccurring dream where I would have this hole in the wall of my bedroom into this dark cave, and I knew there was a monster there that was coming to get me. And so I think that's how maybe I released some of that anxiety and that fear was through this dream.
Yeah.
But it really wasn't until he died when I was a freshman in high school that I actually started remembering everything that happened. So I was, go ahead.
Do you think anybody knew what was happening at the time?
I've talked to people about my abuse in my family afterwards, and my parents didn't know, my sister didn't know about it. I had an older cousin who was also abused, and when the abuse first started happening, my personality shifted. I used to be really outgoing and loving and demonstrative, and I just turned inward and turned into this very shy, withdrawn child.
That seems to be a common occurrence in those situations.
Yeah, that again, it's part of your way of trying to figure out how to protect yourself. So my personality shifted, and my older cousin, who was in high school at the time, she thought to herself, she told me later, "Oh, you know, grandpa's gotten to her too." But as a
Oh,
high school student, you know, what is she going to be able to do? She's still struggling with her mental health around the issue.
yeah.
So she couldn't rescue me at that point.
Yeah.
But that was probably the only person who recognized what was going on. And so it, again, when it came out, it's like the lid came off of all the memories and things came out. And I had body memories and flashbacks and all kinds of things happening. And again, the shame just grew about what had happened to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Pretty much every guest that I've had that we talk about sexual assault, shame is a huge piece of it.
Mhm, mhm.
And no matter how many times I say it on an episode, I always got to repeat it because it is not the victim's fault. It is not your fault that this happened to you. You did not
Yeah,
bring it on. And I mean, I'm lucky enough that I didn't experience that, so I can't relate fully, but just know that, you know, there are people out there that will support you and it's not your fault at all.
totally. I absolutely agree with you. I can say that now because I've gone through my healing and I've really worked on that particular topic. But it was something that I believed for a very long time. It was something that was like in my DNA because the abuse started when I was really little. And when you're that little, you're learning about the world, you're forming your worldview and
Yeah.
understanding and about what people are like and how they treat you and what the world's like. And so I was taught from a very young age that the world's a scary place and people hurt you. People you love can
Yeah.
hurt you. So that was my worldview, you know, is I've got to always be aware and hyper vigilant and be prepared for anything to happen and bad things are going to happen and I have no control over it. And so that's kind of the mind that I grew up in. And then my healing work was a lot of it was to heal that, to
Yes.
change that.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the flashbacks.
Yeah, so there were mainly a few events of the abuse that happened. They lived in a house that sort of was two-tiered, built into the side of a hill, but in the bottom part of the home was his workshop, and that's where the abuse happened most frequently. And so
Oh,
that it was
okay.
just some memories of being trapped there with him and some of the things that happened. And how, you know, a lot of it was just really strong emotional content around how I was feeling, how scared I was, and that sort of thing. And body memories, just feeling that, you know, wherever he had touched me and that sort of thing. So I
Mhm.
don't have a whole storyline, you know, of
Yeah.
what happened. There's these flashes of experiences that happen,
Yeah.
but very clear and vivid enough to know that is my grandfather abusing me. You know,
Yeah.
there's no question, no
Yeah.
question.
Okay. So he passed away and it finally came out. So how did it actually come out?
It just what, like I said, all those things were coming up. It was a lot of stuff happening in my head with the flashbacks and what I was experiencing emotionally and the physical sensations. And I actually, at that point, told someone I was dating. Or I guess, you
Oh,
know, a little bit later, I told someone I was dating. He was totally unprepared to do anything for me, but he at least believed me. He validated my experience.
oh, good. That is so important. If somebody comes to you and says, this happened, one of the most important things you can do to support that person is believe them.
Yes. And often when people are bringing this forward for the first time, they're not asking for you to jump in and do something. What they
No.
really just want you to do is hear them. And as you said, believe what they're saying. That is
Yes.
so critical, like you said, so important. And what happens the first time or two you share as a survivor can really determine what you do from then on. Because if you get someone like I was fortunate to have who believed me, that was, you know, a foundation for, okay, you know, I can be believed. I'm not quite ready to share it beyond there and to do anything beyond that, but the first
Yeah.
step was, you know, okay, I can be accepted for this happening to me. And he didn't run away from it. He was mature enough to continue our relationship
Mhm.
because he was able to see past that, and he wasn't bothered by that. So I was very fortunate for that to happen.
Yeah. I've talked to a few other people on the show, and they've had a very different experience where they weren't believed, or they were just kind of brushed off. And you're right, that first person that you tell sets the whole foundation for whether or not you can positively cope with it, or you just continue to disassociate, you continue negative coping strategies and just keep hiding it.
Yeah, I didn't quite get to that point. At least I was believed, and so I didn't feel like every boy that I'd be interested in would reject me, but it quickly got kind of overwhelmed by all these things that I wasn't dealing with. I just threw myself into school. I always enjoyed learning. I got good grades, and when you got good grades, you got positive reinforcement and the teacher's attention. So that's where all of this energy and angst was funneled. I was in band, I was in girls basketball, I was in the honors AP classes, and I just kept my mind and myself so busy, I didn't have time to dwell on what had happened to me.
Yeah.
So that was the coping strategy.
Yeah. And I mean, it's positive and negative all at the same time, because all of those things that you're choosing to do are very positive, right? It's not like you decided to go start drinking alcohol or do drugs. So you're choosing very positive activities. But when you overwhelm your stuff and just keep piling on all of that stuff, then it can become a negative environment simply because there's so much.
Yeah, and I actually became sort of a perfectionist. So I had this voice in my head from my childhood about my grandfather basically would tell me I'm worthless, I'm unlovable, I deserved what happened to me. And then I had this perfectionist voice who, because I was so desperate for control, I wanted control of what was going on in my life. And so here's this perfectionist voice saying, if you just did everything perfectly, one, no one's going to find out that you're this horrible person inside. And two, you'll get a little more control of your life, possibly. Yeah. And so now I brought up this other voice, but of course we can never be perfect. So now I had another voice that was beating me up, and so that was something that, like you said, they were good things. They served me well. They got me into the college I wanted to get into. They set a pattern of how to be successful and how to do things. But at the same time, there was absolutely, and I was treating my body like a machine because I hated my body, right? Treating my body like a machine.
I mean, it makes sense that you would.
Yeah. My body betrayed me, right? Yeah. And so like I said, I was in girls basketball, so I would push as far as I could with that. I teetered on the edge of having an eating disorder because it was about control, about the amount of food, but I never tipped over because I wanted to be in basketball. And somehow I made the connection that I still needed to eat if I wanted to be able to play.
That's good.
So, it was a control issue, but it wasn't to the extreme. And so, it was this precarious, situation happening until I got into college. And then I started dating a graduate student who was a recovering alcoholic, and he had joined AA, and he was really a powerful influence in my life because he's the one that got me into therapy for the first time.
Oh, excellent. So before we talk about that, I just want to point out the eating disorder part and control, because there are other types of mental health where it's that control feeling. When you feel out of control, especially with traumatic experiences like sexual assault or any other kind of traumatic experience, I find that that's a very common theme for everybody I've talked to, and even in my own life. If there's been something traumatic, I go into like a perfectionism or control mode. So my kind of switch whenever something in my life is feeling out of control is I clean and rearrange my house, because I can control that. And it's not like, oh, good, my house is clean. It's like kind of a freak of nature type of clean and reorganize, and nobody can find anything because mom just moved everything around. But it is that control piece. And I really am so proud of you for being able to, not even consciously, I don't think, but make that connection with basketball and needing to eat, because we could have very easily swung the other way. And so making sure if people can start to recognize, I need to control something, maybe reach out to somebody. It can be a really hard thing to recognize, but maybe if we put it out there to the audience, maybe it'll kind of food for thought and kind of sink in
And I
and
think
simmer
all of the
there.
activities I had with music, with basketball, with school, what it was is there's a goal and you take steps along the way to reach the goal. And when you get that goal, mate, there's this, endorphin rush, there's this positive kind of thing happening. It feels
Yeah.
good to be successful. And it was a continuous kind of stream of little puffs of, oh, I succeeded. Oh, I succeeded, and that I think was what kept me going because I kept getting, and I could see what I needed to do. It was clear the steps I needed to take and how I should do different things to get to where I needed to go. And with basketball and band too, part of those that were so healing in a way for me was because it was groups where I was accepted as who I was. I was a
Yeah.
band geek and there was a bunch of, similar band geek people, and when I was doing the basketball, at that time, years ago, women's athletics wasn't as well recognized and appreciated as it is now. And so there
Yeah.
was some cohesiveness there that was wonderful to be on teams with other women and be really empowered that way. And then, I had the group of kids that were taking the harder classes and kind of bonded there. So I was in these groups, but at the same time, I was separate because,
Yeah.
again, that sense of being different and not allowing myself to get really super close to anyone. And because I was so busy, I didn't really have a social life
Well,
outside
yeah.
of work.
Yeah.
But
Okay. So now let's talk about therapy. So you had this boyfriend, and how did he convince you to go?
I don't know what it was about it. I guess I was at a point that I was ready. Things build up and they build up, and you're kind of going along at a plateau, and all of a sudden something makes a switch for you. This is kind of how my experiences of healing have happened. That going along, tootling along, and then there's just some anxieties building. It gets a little crazy in your head, a little emotional turmoil, and for whatever reason, and then there you hit upon a path that kind of takes you to the next level. And I just think I was ready. He talked to me a lot about his personal experience with being in a group and how it was helping him. And he was just he didn't push me. That was the other thing. He didn't say, this is what you need to do to fix yourself. He accepted me the way I was. And he said, I think this would help you. And I think I was just ready after all the time of being away from my grandfather. And
Yeah.
plus I was not in high school. When you're in college, you're away from your parents, you're away from that experience and the family dynamics and everything that was happening around them. So I stepped out of that. I was independent on my own to a certain extent. And I think it was just this combination of things together let me go ahead and take that step. Now, the irony is, of course, I couldn't afford to pay for the therapy, even though it was through the school. And so my parents needed to do it. So I basically had to lie to my parents about why I wanted to go to therapy. I just told them I was stressed from school. So
Okay.
they bought it, knowing me, and they bought it. But I was able to, with his support, go in and start asking for help at the counseling center at the college. And the first therapist I found was really judgmental about my personal life situation. I was actually dating two people at the same time, which wasn't a good thing. But instead of saying, how is this working for you? Is this maybe the best thing? Let's figure out what. She just was totally judgmental. And so I did not stay with her. But luckily, the next therapist I talked to was really in that space to help me work with me without being judgmental. And that was the first experience I had. And she's the one that got me connected to a therapist-run women's group for survivors of assault and abuse. And then based on my boyfriend's experience with 12-step programs, I went to Survivors of Incest Anonymous group. So they kind of built on each other. That first step to get into individual therapy helped me find the group therapy. And then and each of the group therapy groups had something to share with me. Now, the all women's group was wonderful because it was the first time I was talking to survivors and learning their stories, and they were on different parts of their journey. And one was almost like a mentor because she was so far along. Eventually, she left the group, but it gave me hope, right? It gave me hope that here's someone who had done that work. And the Survivors of Incest Anonymous group, it was men and women. Is first time I really considered that men might be victims.
Yes.
It was,
And it's true. A lot of us don't realize that men can be, but they totally can be.
yeah, and I had never even conceived of that happening. And in fact, there was a gentleman there who was about 70, I guess. He was the age my grandfather was when my grandfather abused me. And he broke down crying about how his mother had abused him. And I was like, totally rocked my world. It was like, oh my God. And that
Wow.
all of these things started shifting things for me to allow me to start doing the work.
Today's episode is sponsored by J&L Flooring and Decor Center in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. We just got the floors in our house completely redone by J&L Flooring, and they look amazing. The floors that we used to have were they were just really ugly, and these ones are absolutely beautiful. They're exactly what I wanted in the price range that I needed. The best part is that they're super durable. I have 7 animals, right? 3 dogs and 4 cats. The floors need to be durable, and these ones are perfect. They're super easy to clean because one of those animals is still a puppy and he has accidents. Nothing's leaking through to my basement. It was happening with my old floors. You'd come downstairs and there'd be this little drip and a little puddle. Not a good thing. So, not to mention that the staff there are so friendly, very helpful. They can explain all of their different floors, the laminate, the tile, the hardwood, everything, carpets. They've got it all there, and the staff know what they're talking about. They also make these really beautiful epoxy tables there. My husband wants one so bad. They are gorgeous. If you need new flooring, then you need to go and talk to J&L Flooring. Tell them you saw this on the Ride or Die show and see what they've got in stock. You want to check out jandlflooring.com or just go visit them at 4424 Montrose Road, Niagara Falls, Ontario. You're not going to be disappointed. How was that? I'm curious. How was that being in a group with somebody that was the same age as the person who abused you?
It was scary for sure. I walked in and I was kind of like in 2 mind spaces because, I was the analytical part of me that was the good kid in school. It's like, okay, check the box, find the group, check the box, go to the group,
Yeah.
And this group was survivors only. Some groups have survivors and their partners that you can get support, but this was just survivors. So my boyfriend had to drop me off and, go through the door.
Yep.
So it was pretty terrifying. And I walk in and I almost walked out because I was like, there are men here. And I knew that, I had researched it and I knew that, but emotionally it didn't hit me till I got in there. But there were young men there, all ages. And part of me just was like, the part of me that kept fighting the whole time I was a kid, not to give up on myself, not to succumb to completely terrible coping mechanisms. There was some spark, and that spark said, sit your butt down and just try it, just stay through it. And once I got through one session, I didn't share at the beginning, but I listened to what people were sharing. I'm like, okay, these people understand me. They've gone through things like me, even if they're older men or younger women, and I felt at home in the sense that I could be in a place where I could be vulnerable and trust that these people were going to believe me, understand me, and could possibly help me.
That's so good. So why did you feel the need to lie to your parents about why you needed the money for therapy?
I wasn't ready to tell them. Part of it was they were not doing so well. And I didn't want to be the reason that they, camel's back kind of thing, that they would separate. And I also didn't want to be the reason that might trigger my mom remembering if she hadn't already remembered anything from her childhood. I'm pretty sure that she was abused from my older cousin who had been abused. We knew that my aunt had been raped by my grandfather at least one time. So I didn't want to be the person to precipitate the breakup or, the mental health issues coming forward for my mother. I took on a lot of responsibility for them.
Yes, which makes sense. And I'm just glad that you had a way to still be able to go to therapy, because sometimes you would have just, not you specifically, but like people, sometimes we would just clam up and not say anything then. and not get the help that we needed. So at least you found a way to go about getting that help still.
Yeah, and I think that we're in such a better place now. We've got much more awareness about mental health, much more awareness around abuse and assault. We have telemedicine that you can find a trauma specialist without having to rely on the resources available to you just in your own city. You can find people online to support you. And there's so much more understanding about trauma and how to help people heal from trauma. So, back when I started my healing, none of that was available. I don't know how much people were even being trained as therapists on how to treat trauma. And, now we've got all of these resources available. And I just really encourage anyone to reach out. That's to me is a foundational piece, is reaching out and making contact with someone who can help you and support you, a neutral person that can guide you on how you would want to work with your situation. And you don't have to go through and relive everything that you experienced as a child. That re-traumatization is not necessary. You don't have to go there. And the therapists I found were great because they focused on what's happening with you now. And what is it about your behaviors you want to change? Now, we can be informed by the fact that you are a survivor, but we don't have to go back and rehash all of that. That's in the past. Let's just focus on what we need to do to heal some old wounds and develop behaviors that you want to have in your life so that you can move forward.
Oh,
and so
that's so good.
That really worked.
Yeah, that's good. And I like that you didn't give up when you met the first judgmental therapist. You tried again, because that can be very daunting.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I say to people. You got to have confidence that you deserve the help, and that there's going to be someone there that can help you. But this is going to be a long-term working relationship.
Oh, yeah.
You got to find someone that you can get along with. Now, sometimes they're going to push you. That's their job. They're going to push you up against the spaces you're not very comfortable with. So you got to understand that that's part of what they're going to be working with you to do, to move beyond what you're kind of limiting yourself for. But at the same time, you have to be able to trust them. You have to be able to have a relationship with them that you're not going to be their best buddy, but you're going to trust them and believe that they can help you.
Yeah, that is so important. If you don't trust the person that's supposed to be helping you, you're not going to be able to share all of the things that you need to share with them.
Mm-hmm. And obviously that trust develops over time, but you have to, go in and I found the best I could with my situation. And then I just went with my gut feeling, do I feel comfortable here or not? And my gut definitely responded with the first one to say, nope, this is not where you need to be. And then there was some intuitive recognition that I was in a place that I could be with this person and I could work with her.
Oh, good. So obviously, your family knows about it now. So how did they actually react once you came out and told them, or however they found out?
Right. So it was, again, I was very lucky in the experiences I had. Now, the first person I connected with was my older cousin. When I was in college and I started going through therapy, I reached out to her and she was very supportive. She's 10 years older than me, so she was very supportive.
That's the one that was also abused?
Yes, yeah. Okay. And so she's the one that recognized the personality change when I was younger.
Yeah.
So she was very helpful to have someone to talk to. And obviously she believed me right away.
Yes.
And then many years later, I said something to my sister about it. And I don't think she was abused. He had a particular type that he liked. And that was my mom, my aunt, my cousin, myself. But there were a couple of my sister and another female cousin. I don't think they were, because they were just not his type. And she doesn't have any memories of it. So that we're pretty sure that he didn't abuse her. But when I told her, I said, I'm not ready to tell mom and dad quite yet. But what I didn't realize is I should have said, and I don't want you to tell them on my behalf.
Oh, yes. You need to be more specific, because sometimes I know okay. So when I was pregnant, it was obviously not planned at the time. And so I didn't tell anybody, and I wasn't planning on telling anybody. or at least until I had to, I guess. And so having somebody else tell my family was actually really helpful for me because I had this fear to tell them. So in a way, sometimes when people do that, they think, okay, I'm helping you because you're not ready to do it, so I'll do it for you.
Mhm.
But I think maybe we need clarification sometimes if that is the right way to go about it.
Yeah, so if you're going to share, make sure you're very explicit about what that person can do with that information.
Yes.
Because she told my parents, and I didn't know. She didn't tell me she was going to tell them. She didn't tell me she had told them.
Oh my
And
goodness.
next conversation with my parents, blah, and I'm like, crap. Because I still was hesitant. This whole thing of responsibility was still there.
Yes.
But they were totally supportive. They validated, they
Good.
believed. And in fact, my mother told me that she had been spending time going through the family album, ripping him out of the photos, so she, that's how she was handling it. But
Yeah.
they believed, obviously they were upset because it happened to me, upset because
Yes.
they didn't protect me, that they should have felt they should have done more. And so, it was validating and at the same time very distressing for them. But
Yes.
we've moved beyond that kind of space. It's been years since I've shared. And,
Yes.
that's part of the thing that I talk about in my book is you have to start making some hard decisions once you begin your healing journey. I've talked about what behaviors you want to change. When you were this small person and got attacked by someone once or many times, you had to learn how to cope. I talked about my perfectionism, my dissociation. There's ways I learned to cope. And a lot of times we do the best we can with what we know.
Exactly.
And it helps us get through it, right?
Yeah.
But when you're an adult, sometimes those things don't work so well.
Yeah. We
They're
need to
not
learn
terribly
some
helpful.
different coping strategies.
Yeah. And so you start to recognize these aren't serving me anymore, but I need to figure out what else to do, hence the therapist. I read a lot of self-help books that can be helpful as well.
Yep.
But I just needed to start asking myself, who do I want to keep in my life? Who knew what when, who should have been there? Okay, those are questions you definitely can consider asking yourself. And who you want to talk to about the abuse, that's your decision. This is all your decision, right, as a survivor.
Yes.
But I had to decide, who do I want to keep in my life? Do I want to keep my cousin? That was a pretty easy decision because she had been supportive. Do I want to keep my sister? Yeah, she screwed up, but her heart was in the right place.
Exactly.
Do I want to keep my parents? That was not a hard decision because should they have protected me? Should they have known? Yeah, shoulda. But these were people that I looked at and said, if the abuse hadn't happened, if I just was choosing people to be in my life, would I want people like this in my life? They're people who are very caring, smart people. I enjoy being with them. So yeah, I'm going to let them be part of my life. And then my grandmother, the wife of my abuser.
Yeah.
Do I want her to be in my life? When he died, she moved to be in a house across the street from my parents. I was already, on to college and things. And I would come home and spend time with her and got to know her. And she's this lovely person. I don't know how many of my friends said, gosh, I wish I had her as my grandma. She's just this wonderful grandma,
Oh, wow.
And I think she kind of blossomed, right? He was such a narcissist, such a controller that when she finally got away from him, she just blossomed.
Okay.
And we never talked about the abuse. I never brought it up. I didn't think that it was worth having a conversation about because I was focused on moving forward.
Yes, I was going to ask. So.
Yep. And so I never talked to her about it. We had a wonderful relationship. I really enjoyed her as a person being in my life until she passed.
Yeah.
But those are some of the things that people, when they start their healing journey, there are going to be people in your life that for whatever reason, it's their stuff, but for whatever reason, they want you to stay the same.
Yeah.
They don't want you to heal. They don't want you to change. And those are people, they may be your parents, they may be your best friend, they may be a sibling. You may have to say, I'm either going to eliminate them or limit the time I spend with them.
Yeah.
Because I don't have the energy to give it to this kind of person. I want to give my energy to myself and the good people in my life.
Yes, that is such a great point. And was there anybody then in your life that you had to say, sorry?
I guess that there really wasn't. there really wasn't anyone, with my grandfather having died, I never had to go through the experience of dealing with him, possibly confronting him, possibly legal action. And so I was very lucky, I guess, to not have to have all of that extra thing. So that he would be the one person, obviously, I would have pushed out of my life because I could have done it as an adult.
Yes.
But otherwise, I felt that there was value in keeping the rest of the people in my life. And, the abuse was recognized, it was validated. We kind of worked through that without a lot of blame. I was at a point, I had waited so long to really start having these conversations that I had gotten pretty far in my healing where I wasn't in a place I needed to point fingers and blame people.
Yes.
I just wanted
Which is really important, I think, is that you were ready for other people to know because you had already done a lot of the work.
Yeah.
And that makes a really big difference.
Yeah. And I think that I was fortunate. Some people aren't. Other people find out about it. They learn about it. It might entail legal action happening. And so everyone's situation is different. Yes. Obviously, everyone's situation is different. And everyone's healing is going to be different.
Of course.
But we get to make a lot of our own choices about how we want to heal, what activities we want to do, what people we want to be involved with. And a lot of that is hard to kind of get your head wrapped around because there's been so long in your life where you didn't have that kind of control.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's worth people taking time. I think healing requires a lot of introspection.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, because you cannot control anybody else. You can only control yourself. And therefore, the only way to heal is to do that introspection and work on you. And like you said, decide who you want to be in your life, decide what activities it is that you want to do, and kind of move forward in that way of, I am going to do this. I am going to keep this person in my life. I am going to think of the positive things, whatever it happens to be, but you can't control other people.
Yeah, and that's kind of what kept me locked in the place I was, is because I felt I had such influence over my parents and what would happen once I told them. Yeah. And so for me, it's been spending a lot of time just first, you have to go through the process of admitting what happened to you, learning that it wasn't your fault, was not your fault. We can't say that enough. Yes. And then, like I said, looking in the mirror and saying, am I the person I want to be? Where am I not the person I want to be? What behaviors, what people, what activities, whatever it is, what part of me do I need to change and say, I don't like that part of me. Thank you. Thank you, part of me that helped me get through this. But I'm just ready to move on from that. And it's kind of hard to hold that mirror up to yourself. You're not going to be doing it to beat yourself up. It's not a shame blame situation. You're just, here's the facts of where I am. And now I've got to decide where I want to move to. Yes. And then you get the help you need, whatever works for you to support you. And in my book, I talk about a lot of different things that you can try, maybe inspire you to find things, but find a way and find multiple things that enrich your life, support you, help your healing. It doesn't have to just be a therapist. It shouldn't just be a therapist. You should find things that bring you joy and engage in those things.
Like subscribing to this channel and listening to every podcast.
Watch the podcast. Get great mental health tips and wisdom and support.
Exactly.
But everyone should be able to do that. And healing is not going to be, I'm going to get on the Autobahn of healing and drive 200 miles an hour to destination heal. Okay.
Oh, if only it was that easy.
Yeah, we all wish for mental health purposes it was just one straight shot and it was done. And so you're going to, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But each time it's really not a step back because you've learned. You're more resilient. You have more tools available. I think of it more as a spiral. The things might come around again, but you've got more available to support you and tools to deal with it. And so it's something that's just going to keep going on and on. And to me, it's kind of like human beings are here to learn and to grow and to expand ourselves. Now, if you're a survivor of assault or abuse, you kind of have to get over that first mountain of what the abuse and all that entailed. But afterwards, I just see myself as someone who's going to continue to heal and grow and expand and learn the rest of my life.
Yes, that's a really good point. So you mentioned this book. Tell us more about it.
That's right. So my book is a self-help book for survivors. It's called Thriving After Sexual Abuse, Break Your Bondage to the Past and Live a Life You Love. And it has several sections in it. So it's not a memoir. Again, my trauma experiences and my timeline of my life, I could never really line up. So I don't have a memoir that I could write, even though my husband encouraged me for years and years to do that. I've written a book that I would have wanted if I had had something like that when I was first starting my healing. So it's a blueprint.
Important. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it does include my story and parts of my story in my life. And then what I'll do is, chapter by chapter, I kind of give you the different things that I did, yoga, meditation, art, whatever it was that I found to be helpful. I describe how it was helpful. And then I give the reader questions that they can journal on so that they can explore for themselves. Right?
I love books that do that give the reader tangible, you can use this right now information or questions.
And one of the first chapters is finding a therapist. So I give you all kinds of ways to find a therapist. And I give you a checklist of what you should be looking for, what questions you ask the therapist before you go, so that you can just look at that and have a way to get moving forward. Because sometimes we just don't know. It's
hard too.
Yeah.
Especially when you go to find a therapist, you're not usually in the best state of mind. You're not like, you know what? I think I'm going to have a mental breakdown next week. I better find a therapist today. No, you're in the middle of your crisis going, I need help. So having like a checklist or something like that is really helpful. That's a great idea.
I've even had therapists say, oh my gosh, this is fantastic to have this list, for people to find us.
Yeah, that's great.
So each chapter is just another little piece, individual therapy, group therapy, so on and so forth. And I walk you through those. And at the end, there's journaling questions that kind of guide you. And then I get into these hard questions like who knew what when, who do you tell, do you confront, how to work with your partner, again, with questions to guide you. Yeah. And I'm not telling you, here's the 20-step program that's going to fix you, right?
Yeah.
That's not what I'm doing. I'm saying, here's what worked for me. What do you think? Can you try this? Is there something else you can try?
Yeah.
And at the end, I actually have a poetry journal.
Oh, nice. I love poetry.
After I had gone through some therapy, I got into doing yoga. And that's when a lot of body imagery healing happened.
Yes.
And at the same time, a lot of other emotional things came out because and your body holds a lot of emotions.
Yes.
And when you start doing things that releases that, what do you do with those?
Yeah.
So I wrote poetry.
That was my go-to when I first started being depressed. That was my go-to. So I can totally appreciate that.
So this at the end is the journal, poetry journal I wrote going through yoga, and it starts with the experiences as a child, but then there's different sections that you follow along with my healing. And it's another way for you to learn more about me and my story, but it's also meant as an inspiration for people to journal themselves.
That's awesome. So where do people get their hands on this book?
You can find it pretty much everywhere. It's on Amazon. You can get a paperback or a Kindle version. It's on Google Play.
And I know that you said the title earlier in the episode, but say it right now.
Okay. So it's Thriving After Sexual Abuse, Break Your Bondage to the Past and Live a Life You Love. And you can find it by the title or just search for my name, Denise Bossarte. So Amazon and Google Play, iTunes, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, just pretty much anywhere. Sometimes the libraries have it. Some libraries have been picking it up as well. And I just finished recording myself reading the book. So hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll have an audiobook too.
I love audiobooks. I'm just about finished the one that I'm listening to right now. So I got to find a new one to listen to, but I love it. So I like music, but sometimes it gets boring because I just have the same playlist, right? So, and I walk my dogs twice a day and then I go for a run and exercise or whatever. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks. So I love when I hear authors turning their books into audiobooks.
So we'll see how long it takes for them to process it, but it'll be out there. So yeah, so just look around. You could probably just do a Google search and it'll put it up for you. Yeah. But yeah, I just really want this to be, like I said, a blueprint, a guidebook to really get people to understand what possibilities there are. And with those journaling questions, just helping them find their own path. I'm not trying to dictate what you should do. I'm not a psychotherapist or an analyst or anything.
Yeah.
What I can do is share my story, my inspiring activities and practices that I did and how they helped me, and then try to guide you into discovering that for yourself.
Yeah. That's awesome. And where do people follow you?
So I have social media accounts. I have my Twitter site, Am Thriving After. I'm on Facebook for Thriving After. And then I actually have a website where if you kind of are confused on where things are, this website is the go-to place. It's thrivingaftersexualabusebook.com.
Excellent. And we're going to put those links down in the description below so people can very easily find you, find the website, do whatever they need to do to get a hold of your books. And so just thank you again so much for being on the show.
Thank you for an opportunity to share. I really hope this is something that can help your listeners. And even if you're not a survivor yourself, if you know of someone, or if you're a mental health professional and want to share it with clients, or you want to share it with your therapist to help other people, it's meant to be used in a lot of ways. And I think it would help survivors for sure, but their partners, their families, their friends, everybody, I think, can learn a lot from being able to get a hold of the book.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we have a sponsor for today's episode. It is Taylor Smith Design. And I have been using the services for, I guess, almost over a year now. I use the do-it-yourself services, and it makes posting on my social media so much easier. Seriously. They have a user-friendly platform where I can schedule all of my posts for the whole year on multiple social sites at the same time. The best part about that is that I can create recurring posts, so I don't have to constantly redo the same thing, which works great when promoting my books. Plus, if you run multiple businesses like I do, since I'm my kid's momager, you can hook it up to multiple accounts. One price for all of your needs, and it saves me so much time. Depending on the level that you sign up for, it can do so much more than just that. I'm still trying to figure out some of the features that it offers. If you need an affordable solution for your social media needs, then go to getseensocial.ca, use code WRITEORDIE to get your first month totally free. All right. Who doesn't like free? Remember, you want to go to getseensocial.ca and use the code WRITEORDIE. Get that first month free. Again, thank you, Denise, for sharing about your experiences. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button here at the channel. Share these episodes out with your friends because, I mean, especially this one, the stats of sexual assault are staggering and scary. So even though if you can't particularly think of somebody that might need this information, you know what, you probably do and just don't realize that you do. So share this out. Of course, we do have a merch store. 10% of the proceeds goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly.